That always doesn't happen when you have Ohio and Michigan people on the same committee, that we come together for the same team.
For rapidly growing leagues like the WNBA,
Today, when we're meeting with teams, they talk about reaching 35–40% of all the households in the market.
Top 3 executives at the NCAA as high as $3.5 million.
Afroland TV, American New Network, BET Plus, For Us, By Us Network.
Football is a religion down south, so this thing is moving at the speed of light.
They just want to know who's going to write the check.
Right.
A Southern catastrophe, and that was the Tennessee-Alabama game being blacked out. The best league out there.
Big Ten.
I'm not sure if she's a Kansas City fan or a Taylor Swift fan.
Don't worry, I'm not going to make any SEC commentary, about how great the Gators are. They are.
Good morning, and welcome to today's educational hearing on the state of sports media rights. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses who represent an array of perspectives that are vital to the industry. Sports have the unique ability to bring people together from different backgrounds and unite in support of a common team. I'll just make a footnote there for my friend down here from Michigan, that always doesn't happen when you have Ohio and Michigan people on the same committee, that we come together for the same team, especially when we lose.
all of this success is occurring against the backdrop of a rapidly shifting media marketplace. Consumers have more choices than ever when it comes to the way they watch their favorite sports. Streaming helps increase competition, drive down costs, and allow consumers to cut the cord if they want to. Rather than signing up for large bundles full of content, many consumers aren't interested in. Online video provides consumers a better chance to pay for everything they want and nothing that they don't. These services are also providing new avenues for diverse content to reach a wider audience. From rapidly growing leagues like the WNBA or women's NCAA volleyball to more targeted content like Major League Soccer and Formula One, streamers are creating new markets. But while the proliferation of streaming has benefited consumers in many ways, it's also created new challenges.
The witnesses before us today are Brian Lawlor, president of Scripps Sports, John Bergmayer, the legal director at Public Knowledge, Rob Thun, the chief content officer at DirecTV, and John Ourand, the sports correspondent at Puck News. Mr. Ourand, and in recent years, what is the most significant change, as you just went through things, but what would you consider the most significant change that you've seen in sports media in the recent years?
That's a good question. I'm going to say take it outside of media and outside of sports media. I'm going to answer your question as media, and certainly the rise of streaming services like Netflix, like Amazon Prime Video, Apple TV Plus. What has happened in the pay TV business is that people that are not sports fans that like entertainment programming, they've already cut the cord. And so if you think about your own personally, how you watch television. When was the last time you sat down and watched a serial on broadcast TV with commercials? Most people are binging on Netflix or binging on Apple TV Plus. And so I think the most significant change has been the cord cutting that has happened because of that. And right now, I think one of the reasons that we're focused on sports is that sports fans are the last bastion holding the pay TV system together, in my opinion.
That's what we have seen in talking to leagues and teams. The most dramatic difference that exists today in sports versus a decade ago is reach. Whether it's the leagues, except for the NFL, which has over-the-air broadcast on almost for all of their teams and the league, but most other leagues are on either ESPN or Turner, and as we've seen through cord cutting, they're reaching a lot less U.S. households. And then in local markets, regional sports networks 10 years ago was a terrific business. It would reach 80% of all the households in the markets. Today, when we're meeting with teams, they talk about reaching 35–40% of all the households in the markets. And so to be an owner of a NHL or an NBA team and to not be able to put your games in front of 2/3 of your fans in your home market is a dramatic change.
Sports have always been sometimes you'd have to change channels to watch a different game. A different media company would buy the rights, it would be on a different channel. Well, that's kind of easy. People know how to change channels. I think one of the big, it's not just, oh, you have to flip to another app. It's the platforms that users have to navigate. Smart TVs, Roku, Apple TV, they all work differently. So it's very hard to just give uniform instructions to tell people how to do it. They might need to first set up an account with Apple or with the smart TV company, set up an account on the Samsung App Store or what have you, then install that and then set up yet another account with that. So I think even if it seems like, oh, what's the big deal? It's just different apps you install an app. Just think through the experience and think, even trying to help, at least for me, trying to help people who are less technically savvy through these things, maybe over the phone, it can be very challenging. So I absolutely agree. The cost issue is pretty significant. I think online is still better than the cable bundle in terms of cost, but this inconvenience, I think, is really a sore point for consumers.
Mr. Lawlor, can you discuss the role of WNBA and National Women's Soccer Leagues in Scripps' footprint, and do you see them as an opportunity for growth moving forward?
Thank you for the question. We're really excited about using the ION platform to showcase women's sports. As I said in my prepared remarks, this is a priority of the company.
The AFC wildcard matchup was aired exclusively on the streaming service Peacock. And this is a prime example of the transition from sports content moving from traditional cable and broadcasting to streaming. Do you think consumers should expect more of these streaming-only games?
Unfortunately, yes. I think that direct consumer apps are going to use these tentpole events as a vehicle to drive people into their experiences to see if they can drive higher subscriptions. And that's going to come at the expense of the games that came out of pay TV.
Yep.
So it's going to lead to more frustration as subscribers who used to get that game as part of their subscription with us now have to go out and sign up for, in this case, Peacock.
I know it's still developing, but could you share a bit more about the complex media rights in our market and speak generally on the value of media rights in similar deals, and how might this sale change the way fans who watch the Orioles and Nationals in our area access games?
First of all, thank you very much for bringing up that story that I broke yesterday. I did not cede that question with you, so I appreciate that. In the D.C. market, there's a Mid-Atlantic sports network that was created when the Washington Nationals came to town, the Orioles, the neighboring Orioles, own most of the network. And that was a way to get the Orioles, that was a way that Major League Baseball got the Orioles to say okay to let the Nationals come in, because the Orioles had owned the D.C. market. And in fact, if you go to Orioles games now, you never see Virginia license plates or D.C. license plates up there because they all go to Nationals games. That was something that was, in my opinion, a way for Major League Baseball to kick the can down the road. Like, let's create something here and we'll figure it out. And here we are 20 years later and nothing has been figured out on that. Now the Orioles own about 3/4 of it. The Nationals own 1/4 of it. It's unclear exactly what's happening with it, but if a couple of billionaires have decided to buy the Baltimore Orioles, you can be certain that there is some sort of resolution with Masson in that.
Last night, Michigan versus Michigan State basketball, major rivalry game in my district and DC office as well, was streamed exclusively on Peacock. I understand if games are only available on streaming for those currently out of state like me and my DC staff, but my constituents back in Michigan didn't have access to the game on local channels either. Even those students in East Lansing and Ann Arbor couldn't watch unless they paid another streaming service. Peacock struck a deal with the Big Ten for 8 conference football games and 52 conference men's and women's basketball games to be exclusively streamed. This also includes an exclusive deal for 2 games each for the Big Ten's men's and women's tournaments. I understand that it's a free market and we should keep it that way, but this suddenly feels like pay-per-view for college games. When people pay for cable or VMVPD subscriptions or even over-the-air antennas, they do so believing they will have access to their local games at the very least. In September, I had to listen to the first national champion U of M football game on radio. This is especially problematic in rural districts like mine.
Yeah, the ACP is currently funding about 22 million Americans and helping them connect to broadband. As we all know, you need broadband to watch online video. You need fast, you need a very high quality connection. And I certainly would worry if many people are having to lose their internet connection or maybe even cut back to a lower tier that might not be as well suited for online video. That certainly could reduce the potential audience for sports or other video content online and really harm online video businesses of all kinds.
Mr. Ourand, when college athletic conferences and the NCAA bring in massive media rights deals without player pay being a factor, do we see similar increases in salaries and bonuses for coaches, athletic directors, and executives? And how is the money that these deals bring in distributed? How is it distributed?
Yes, of course, you see coaches get paid more if you get more rights. That's why you see a lot of the best deals, the coaches' deals come from the SEC or come from the Big Ten. I think what a college administrator would say is that a lot of what they do with the money that comes in helps to fund non-revenue sports or a lot of the sports that don't bring in that revenue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they overemphasize the word "a lot" of the money goes there. In 2021, at the NCAA, we saw compensation for their top 3 executives at the NCAA as high as $3.5 million, $3.2 million, and $1.4 million per year.
Yeah, I mean, the specific comment about how people subscribe to services that increasingly also have ads, that certainly is a source of common consumer complaints. And I think what you mentioned about the convenience of games, I agree it is a free market. I think the issue sometimes that I see with sports is the short-term gain versus the long-term building up of a fan base, meeting fans where they are. And my worry here is that in a free market, sometimes the companies are incentivized to have very short-term deals that seem to make sense right away, but are alienating the fan base or perhaps not growing the fan base to a new generation of viewers. So I agree that the free market eventually works things out. It takes some time, and lots of companies make some pretty significant mistakes along the way.
Streaming is now the most widely watched form of video in America. Streaming has ushered in many new diverse offerings, including Afroland TV, American New Network, BET Plus, For Us, By Us Network, Telemundo, Televisa, Univision, and many more. This phenomenon has continued for sports programming, with the Allen Media Group securing a broadcast right from the Central Intercollegiate Athletic Conference and to distribute HBCU sports on a host of platforms, including new streaming services, HBCU Go. Mr. Bergmayer, how has the emergence of streaming led to a more diverse offering?
Yeah, I think, again, getting past the cable or the satellite gatekeeper, getting into that small available window of programming, online video just in general and the internet in general has really broken down barriers, I think, for diverse creators. You know, at the same time, though, I wouldn't say that it's just enough that diverse creators can start their own website or they can go on YouTube. You know, we need to make sure that there's diverse content available and the platforms that people actually watch and subscribe to, the major streaming platforms. Frankly, some of them do a good job, some of them do a poor job. There's a lack of data on this, a lack of independent data, rather.
As we look toward the future of RSNs, do you anticipate more teams, such as the Pittsburgh Penguins, moving toward broadcast model for RSNs, or teams or leagues buying back their rights? What's better for the consumer?
That's a good question. I'm not quite sure what's better for the consumer, but I can tell you are going to see a trend of teams looking to sell their rights to local broadcast stations. You're also going to see a trend of teams looking to sell their rights to a streaming company.
Can you summarize how media rights negotiations are unique in the college sports world and how these negotiations actually ultimately shape the makeup of the conferences?
What's unique about college is that when networks negotiate for media rights with the NFL or MLB or NHL, those are national media rights. But the networks then have to go to the SEC and negotiate based on the southeastern part of the United States, and the Big Ten for the northern part of it's very much bifurcated in the market right now, and so it makes each conference have to negotiate different deals with different networks, and there's not one central area where people can negotiate for that.
Can you discuss how the rise of cord cutting has influenced traditional subscriptions, broadcasting, cable, and any impacts that this trend could have generally that may be less obvious?
Yeah, I think one of them is the kinds of content that people access through local broadcasters, that there's not a clear model online. I mean, broadcasters obviously are local. They're inherently local. They serve a community. They have a tower. The signal reaches an area. And that's simply not the way that the internet works. And, it's very challenging to think how to ensure that if more and more people, if that's how they're watching their content online, I don't really have specific solutions.
How have streaming services impacted the viewership of collegiate sports specifically, and have you seen any impact on non-revenue generating and women's sports?
The streaming services generally have fewer viewers than traditional TV, and I haven't seen any impact on the non-revenue sports at all, no.
Or women's?
Or women's, no.
Okay.
I'm from the SEC, and, football is a religion down south, so, and I get a lot of complaints, to be honest with you. Obviously, you got to follow the money. Money's driving all of these options. This thing is moving at the speed of light, and now you got AI and all these other things coming in. Are we going to be able to keep up? I mean, how is this going to affect your business model?
It's going to have a big effect because the participants in pay TV today have company valuations with Bs. The folks that you're referring to have valuations with Ts behind their market cap. So they have a lot more disposable money to play in this space, and as sports rights become more and more expensive, and as pay TV wanes and subscriptions go down because the prices are already too high, you're inviting big tech to come in to swoop in and buy those rights, and the leagues are pretty agnostic. They just want to know who's going to write the check.
Right.
And as long as somebody can write that big check, they'll happily take it.
Do you think there is a future where a type of hybrid model can work here, or is it a market moving in one direction? Hit your microphone, please. Thank you.
I find it very, very hard to predict beyond a couple of years because nobody knows. I think for the next several years, you are going to see some sort of hybrid model. And I think it's one thing that the leagues really want to do, because one of the biggest complaints that I hear are about blackouts, especially for NBA games, NHL games, Major League Baseball games. And those blackouts are caused by regional sports networks. If they're spending that much money for the rights, then they want to make sure that they that they have their designated areas for that. Nobody else can encroach in on that. So the hybrid model potentially could solve that problem.
Would any other members like to add to that? You have 40 seconds. Mr. Lawlor.
Well, I agree. The hybrid model is something that we'll probably see, over the next couple of years.
That's the way I view it. I think it's an outrage, and I don't think we can sidestep that. I don't know how any outfit can become attractive to a consumer when the outfit hammers the very paying customer. I mean, my father always used to say, "My customers are always right." That was his business model. He was a jeweler and a watchmaker by trade. So who wants to speak to this?
I can take a crack at it if you don't mind.
Good.
We're at this place because the prices of pay TV have gone up to an absurd degree. And you look at what's the biggest driver of cost increases, it's sports and broadcast. And sports kind of fuels the cost of broadcast. Broadcast television has gone up by 270%.
Well, let me ask this, because none of us have a lot of time. Do the broadcasters support this effort at the FCC?
Well, I'm not a policy expert. The one thing that I just mentioned is that our company is really committed to getting deals done.
No, but do you support that? It's a yes or no.
I haven't spent enough time. working with.
I'm not going to speak for anyone in general. I believe that the broadcast industry does not support the FCC's current retransmission consent
Why?
blackout refund.
Why?
Why don't they support it? I believe because they want to keep the money, and that's and I share your outrage on this. And it's hardly the only anti-consumer practice in the industry that the FCC is currently addressing. We've talked about how ETFs, early termination fees, and cable, the FCC is addressing as well.
Gentlemen?
To me? Listen, if there's mandates that rebates are provided to customers, you've handed even more leverage to broadcasters in already stilted negotiations.
Why?
Well, the numbers that I just shared with you, 270% since 2015, that wasn't by our design. We didn't want the prices to go up that high, but that's what's being imposed upon us. That's why there's so many blackouts. That's why so many people have left pay TV. The prices have gotten to an absurd level, and we fight like hell to keep them as low as possible.
Mr. Ourand?
I think the broadcasters would tell you that it's a market solution, and that they're getting paid exactly. They're investing in the programming, and they're getting compensated for that programming as well. I think that would be what the broadcasters would say.
Mr. Lawlor and Mr. Thun, this past college football season, my constituents narrowly escaped a southern catastrophe, and that was the Tennessee-Alabama game being blacked out. So, and it was all because of a dispute between Charter and Disney, who owns ESPN. We know that. But ultimately, cooler heads prevailed, and we got to watch the game, even though Alabama won, which I'm sorry about that. But the costly TV rights affiliated with live sports could cause this to happen again in the future, right before a kickoff. So is there anything we can do in Congress? Or should it be left to the free market for a solution?
Well, we suggested in the midst of a blackout, a potential avenue for us to explore with broadcasters where, since we fight every time in these contract renewals over price, let the broadcasters have the pricing in their hands. We'll serve the customers and let them charge and bill them directly for that. That way, there are no blackouts. The customers get to choose, they get to set the price, and away we go. Unfortunately, that is a model that the broadcasters haven't embraced because they want to bank on 100% carriage and payment by us, and that's what leads to this friction, unfortunately.
With the amount of services needed to see every live game, it's starting to seem as though it'd be cheaper to buy some sports on pay-per-view rather than adding another subscription, basically. Is there any movement toward pay-per-view for sports, and how would that be beneficial or harmful?
I'm not seeing really much of a movement toward pay-per-view for sports. I think the sports leagues would view that as very harmful because they're only getting paid by the people that watch the sports. And I think one of the reasons that the pay TV prices have gone up is that everybody pays for that sports, whether you the sports channel, whether you watch it or not.
What would happen if the SEC chose to have an exclusive rights agreement with the streaming network?
It depends on where you are in the country. As a Georgia Bulldog, it's very important to me.
Oh.
As a Tennessee Vol,
Yeah.
I assume it's pretty good dogs. I think it's probably important to you as well.
Hush up, buddy.
But it's an important part of our programming lineup. We would not like to see that go exclusively to another streamer because that's just another friction point for our customers who used to get that content as part of our subscription to go leave. Now, I don't think ESPN has intentions to do that, but you never know.
No.
And their deal runs, thankfully, into the 30s, so we have a little bit of time on our hands to enjoy the SEC while we have it.
Well, the best league out there as well. So with that, I'll yield back, Mr. Balder.
Big Ten. Next up is Mr. Pfluger.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate the witnesses being here. My script says, as a lifelong Dallas Cowboys fan, and I quit rooting for them about 2 weeks ago. And the father of 3 daughters who love Taylor Swift. I have my daughter here, personal point of privilege. My middle daughter, Caroline, is in the room here. And so I'm not sure if she's a Kansas City fan or a Taylor Swift fan, but I'm sure that our ratings have been accelerated by something. I'm not sure exactly what it is. No, let's get to the question I want to ask. In West Texas, since I don't live in the metropolitan area, in DFW, would folks in my district, Mr. Bergmayer, when it comes to Midland, Odessa, San Angelo, would they be able to watch the Dallas Cowboys or would they have multiple viewing options, for the Dallas Cowboys? Some of them are still fans, believe it or not. Love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, as we've discussed today, the NFL games, they're available on local broadcast. I think the problem is that the local broadcast markets, the DMAs, they don't really coincide necessarily with where fans are distributed. So I think in many cases there's going to be fans, whereas games are online and they're out of technically the local market of that team at a different place. Yes, I do think we're going to see more games that are available only on paid streaming services.
I think, having those options is obviously important, especially on the broadcast option for areas like that may not be exclusively in one region or the other. What are your thoughts on the industry trend just in general? I mean, do you think that this hybrid model is going to be, will it continue?
I think the hybrid model is what we have, and it's likely to continue because I do not believe that there's going to be just one way that people continue to watch video.
Can you tell me the difference or how the college sports marketplace differs from the professional? How does it differ? Or does it?
It differs greatly, especially in terms of football, where you have different conferences. So Georgia is part of the SEC, Ohio State is part of the Big Ten, and they negotiate national deals based on their regional footprint. Professional sports with the NFL, with the NBA, and Major League Baseball, they negotiate just national deals. That's it, and then the individual teams.
You think that's going to change as we see a consolidation of the conferences, though? I mean, we got Texas and Oklahoma in the SEC now.
I believe Stanford's in the Atlantic Coast Conference as well. Yeah. I would expect something to change. I have no knowledge that anything's going to change, but I think one of the areas of growth in the business of college sports is to centralize everything and actually go to the market with a really big package.
I suspect that's the case.
Part of the conference realignment was about money, obviously. Because the Pac-12 failed to get a market-based television deal, and those colleges couldn't compete with the likes of the SECs or the Big Tens or even the Big 12s or the ACC. So they had to pack their bags and find new conferences, and some of them found their way into the Big Ten, and some found their way into the ACC. What that means for subscribers, though, interestingly, what it means to our checkbooks, is that these conference payments are predicated on the team territories and the states that those colleges occupy. So suddenly the ACC is going to get money from pay TV for California, for Oregon. You're going to have the Big 12 just picked up Colorado, where it wasn't in the footprint before. You will have the SEC now picking up Oklahoma, that was sitting in the Big 12 before. The Big Ten has the widest berth of teams across the country, and they didn't coincidentally pick teams from big markets where they could draw big subscriber fees. Right.
Appreciate it, gentlemen, for being here with us, hanging into the very bitter end. Don't worry, I'm not going to make any SEC commentary, about how great the Gators are. They are. I go Gators. Trying to get a better sense, really, for how you're meeting that millennial and Gen Z audience. So are younger generations generally consuming sports differently? I personally believe they are, particularly either on our phones or tablets instead of a television. Clearly, there's got to be some data out there highlighting that. And if so, how does this impact the future of the industry and how companies are making decisions in sports media specifically?
Thank you for the question. I do one quick comment to Mr. Balderson. We got to get more Big Ten on this panel here. I don't know what's going on.
Couldn't agree with you more, sir.
Easy.
I think you're right that what the leagues have recognized is that younger people are watching games differently, and what that means is that they're not sitting down for a 3-hour game, and they're happy to follow the highlights of a game on TikTok, even if they're not seeing it in real time. And one of the big areas that the leagues are looking to grow is to try to figure out how to get younger millennials and Gen Z into watching games longer, because that's then where they can sell more advertising, buy it, and make more money out of it.
Can you discuss the trends then in popularity or viewership of different professional sports leagues and the contract element based on streaming services versus that traditional, say, as you were saying, linear TV?
Well, here's a funny thing, and Mr. Thun said this earlier. You have the streaming services with Amazon, with Google, YouTube, Apple. They all are trillion-dollar companies, and the owners of the broadcast stations are multiple billion-dollar companies, but they have a B in front of it.
Yeah.
And so, what's unique about that is that these big tech companies aren't spending as much as the leagues had hoped for these rights. And one of the reasons is because when you stream, something, you're going just to the people that want to see that game. It's almost like a pay-per-view of sorts, as opposed to the traditional television where you're paying for all the subscribers are paying for that one, whether they watch it or not.
Mr. Lawlor, in an interview last April, you discussed how teams and leagues can make up for smaller rights fees they may receive from broadcasters versus streaming platforms by reaching wider audiences and consequently driving increased ticket and merchandise sales as well as sports betting. So can you discuss if and how you have considered the potential negative impact increased ads and sports betting content might have on those struggling with or are vulnerable to gambling addiction?
Thank you for the question. I think it's an important question. We've certainly contemplated that inside of our company relative to the rights we've acquired. We believe that there is a place for appropriate integration with gambling, but we don't see it as on our primary over-the-air channel. Next generation television is sort of the next standard of over-the-air broadcast, which would provide the opportunity for second screen content. Think of like the Manning cast on ESPN, where you have your primary over-the-air broadcast and then secondary commentary and so forth. We think that there could be platforms down the road for something like that, which may be sports betting specific, but it's not appealing or pushed to the general population. It would be something that a specific audience would target and therefore not expose a broader audience.
Without objection, the subcommittee is adjourned.